On May 21st, 2026, Bungie announced the end of Destiny 2. Hours later, Bloomberg reported that significant layoffs are coming, that the studio has no successor project lined up, and that Bungie has no immediate plans to start work on Destiny 3. Within hours, the internet declared the franchise dead. Gaming forums filled with eulogies, content creators rushed to publish funeral videos, Twitter timelines became a wall of RIP Destiny. They're wrong about what happens next. Not because Bloomberg got the story wrong, Jason Schreier's reporting is accurate, and his sources are real. The Destiny 2 development team is being downsized. A Destiny 3 has not been greenlit. Those facts are confirmed and important. But not greenlit today is not the same as never happening. And anyone treating those two statements as equivalent is misunderstanding how companies actually behave after they spend $3.5 billion acquiring a video game studio. This is what's actually happening and why Destiny 3 is almost certainly on the way. Let's start with what we know for certain, because the panic online is built on people misreading the facts. Bungie's official announcement on May 21st confirmed that Destiny 2 receives its final live service content update on June 9, 2026. The update is called Monument of Triumph. After it ships, active development on Destiny 2 ends, and the servers stay online indefinitely, just as Bungie has maintained the original Destiny servers for years after that game's active development concluded. 8 hours after Bungie's announcement, Bloomberg's Jason Schreier published a follow-up report. His sources at Bungie confirmed 3 things. First, a significant number of layoffs are planned, and this will be the studio's 3rd major workforce reduction since Sony acquired it. Second, the Destiny 2 development team has no successor project lined up. Third, Bungie does not plan to immediately enter production on Destiny 3. That's the entire factual basis for the doom posts you've been reading. 3 statements, all of them confirmed, and none of them mean what people online are claiming they mean. What Schreier did not report is that Sony has canceled the Destiny franchise. He did not report that Bungie has shelved the IP forever. He did not report that Destiny 3 will never be made. Because none of those things are true, and none of his sources said them. The headlines online are filling in conclusions the actual reporting doesn't support. The reporting says Destiny 3 isn't in active production right now. The internet is reading that as Destiny is finished forever. Those are 2 completely different claims, so let's talk about what Sony actually paid for and what that money is doing to the timeline. In 2022, Sony Interactive Entertainment acquired Bungie for $3.6 billion. That number is not symbolic. It's a real check Sony wrote, backed by real shareholder accountability, and Sony has to justify that expense to its investors every single quarter. What did Sony actually buy? They bought a studio. They bought the Destiny IP, including all of its lore, characters, design patents, and development tools. They bought a player base built over a decade. They bought live service infrastructure that took years to construct. And they bought the institutional knowledge of one of the most experienced shooter development teams in the industry. The studio alone, without the IP, is worth a fraction of $3.6 billion. The Destiny intellectual property is what Sony actually paid for. Everything else is supporting infrastructure. For the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2026, Sony recorded a combined impairment loss of $766 million against Bungie's assets. That number is being misread online too. An impairment loss is an accounting acknowledgement that an asset is currently worth less than what you paid for it. It is not a refund. Sony has not gotten back any of the $3.6 billion. They've simply admitted on their balance sheet that for now the investment is underwater. The impairment hit in 2 stages, about $200 million in the second quarter, driven by Destiny 2's continued decline, then $565 million in the fourth quarter, timed almost exactly with Marathon's launch. Sony does not need Destiny 3 to be a hit to recover from these losses. They need Destiny 3 to exist, because the entire premise of the $3.6 billion purchase was that Bungie's flagship franchise would continue to generate revenue under Sony ownership. Without Destiny continuing as a franchise, that premise collapses, and Sony has to explain to shareholders why they wrote a check for $3.6 billion for an asset they're abandoning. That conversation does not happen. The question now is timing. Why isn't Destiny 3 in active production today if the business case is this obvious? The answer is Marathon. Bungie's Marathon launched on March 5th, 2026 as a $40 extraction shooter. It was the studio's first major non-Destiny release in over a decade. According to a Forbes report by Paul Tassi, the game cost over $200 million to produce, likely closer to $250 million, not counting ongoing live service expenses. The reviews were positive. Steam reviews settled into the very positive category with over 49,000 ratings praising the gunplay, the world design, and the core extraction mechanics. The audience never came. Marathon peaked at roughly 88,000 concurrent Steam players on launch day, March 6th. Within weeks, that number had cratered. By May 21st, the day Bungie announced the end of Destiny 2, Marathon was sitting at around 7,800 concurrent Steam players. That's a 91% decline from its launch peak in less than 3 months. Industry analysts estimate Marathon has sold approximately 1.2 million copies across all platforms, generating around $55 million in gross revenue. Against a development budget of over $200 million, that math does not work. Analysts have noted that given typical revenue splits and Marathon's price point, the game would need to sell several times its current volume to recoup its development budget. Sony's response is not to abandon Marathon. Their response, according to Bloomberg's reporting and Bungie's own public statements, is to redirect resources toward making Marathon work. Game director Joe Ziegler has publicly committed to a multi-year content roadmap. This is the part everyone is missing. Sony is not pivoting away from Destiny because they don't want a Destiny 3. Sony is pivoting toward Marathon because they need to give it a chance to recover before they commit Bungie's remaining resources to the next Destiny project. Marathon has roughly 12 months to prove viability. After that, Sony makes a decision. There's another reason the panic doesn't match the facts. Bungie has done this exact thing before. In September 2016, Bungie released Rise of Iron, the final major expansion for the original Destiny. After that, active content development on Destiny 1 wound down. The studio reorganized, staff transitioned to the next project. The franchise's player base panicked in roughly the way the player base is panicking today. Destiny 2 launched on September 6, 2017. That's approximately 12 months from the release of Destiny 1's final expansion to the launch of Destiny 2. Not a decade or even 5 years, but roughly 1 year. The pattern is documented and the elements are repeating. A Destiny game reaches the end of its content lifecycle. Active development winds down. The studio reorganizes. The successor ships roughly 12 to 18 months later. There is no fundamental reason to assume the pattern will not hold this time. The franchise structure is the same. The studio infrastructure, while smaller after layoffs, is the same. The development pipeline that produced Destiny 2 from the foundations of Destiny 1 still exists at Bungie. Engine technology, art assets, narrative frameworks, gameplay systems, most of that work transfers forward to the next game in the series. The Bloomberg report says Destiny 3 is not in active production right now. That's consistent with the 2016 timeline. In 2016, Destiny 2 was also not in immediate active production after Rise of Iron shipped. It ramped up gradually as the studio shifted resources off the previous game and onto the next one. Same studio, same publisher motivations, same franchise IP, and the same timeline shape. The conclusion writes itself. Here's what is actually true. Destiny 2 is ending its active content updates on June 9th, 2026. Layoffs are happening at Bungie this week, and real people are losing real jobs. That's confirmed, and it's bad, and it deserves acknowledgement. This is the third major wave of cuts since Sony acquired the studio in 2022. And the human cost across those 3 rounds has been enormous. Destiny 3 is not currently in active production, that's also confirmed. But the math forces Destiny 3 to exist. Sony cannot write off $3.6 billion on a franchise they refuse to continue. Marathon cost over $200 million to make and is not generating the returns to justify the acquisition price alone. The Destiny IP is the only asset in Bungie's portfolio that has ever generated the kind of revenue Sony paid for. The realistic timeline, based on Bungie's own historical pattern, puts Destiny 3 in some form of active development within 12 to 18 months. The realistic launch window, assuming standard development cycles, lands somewhere in 2028 or 2029. That's not a guarantee, that's the most probable outcome given documented facts, documented business behavior, and documented historical precedent. What's not realistic is the version of this story being told online right now, where Sony abandons a $3.5 billion IP because Marathon underperformed. That version requires Sony to behave irrationally against the interest of its shareholders in a way that contradicts how every major game publisher has ever behaved toward a flagship IP. Companies don't work like that. Sony doesn't work like that. Destiny 3 is coming. It's just not coming today.